awesome to see so many people coming out for this event. So I'm Joe Fry, if you haven't met me yet. I'm the Community Development Fellow for Beaverton and Gladwin through Project Rising Tide. Project Rising Tide is a state initiative to help local communities with community development work, which includes branding. That's why we're here tonight. Our consultant, who has been working really hard with us to come up with this new look, Ben Muldrow, will be helping lead this conversation. So,
awesome.
Take it away.
Thank you, Joe. How's everybody doing? Good. Is anybody excited?
Yeah.
Is anybody nervous? Yeah, I know the ice is melting. I drove in this morning. I was like, wait, I don't know this place. I see grass everywhere. Well, I want to thank you all for coming out to this conclusion presentation of the branding process. Hopefully, you're going to see some interesting things tonight. I've got a ton to share with you. It has been a fantastic week here, and just getting to meet everybody last week, getting to talk to you about what you love about your communities, and then being able to turn that into a toolkit that helps you all to tell your unique stories and preserve what you love about your home. That's really what we're shooting for with this. So I want to jump right in because, as I said, I'm hitting at about 75 slides. So I try to keep this to a good 3 to 3.5 hours. No, I'm just kidding. We'll keep this nice and tight, but I always like to just share observations. I mean, obviously, as we dig in, it's always easy to start with the community logos themselves. These are so amazing that we can just stop here and I guess we're just done. You know, everything you got's good. No. Seals are an important tool, but you can't just jump right in. You have to understand a little bit about the market. And I think it's fair for us to comment on the complexity of a project like this. That the Project Rising Tide is a project that is focused in on the city of Gladwin and the city of Beaverton simultaneously. But in addition to that, we had a unique opportunity where the county had received a county-wide marketing grant. So there was this opportunity for us to truly work in tandem and create recommendations on both municipal levels as well as on a county-wide level to be able to tell the story of Gladwin County. So as we look at that, I always like to dig into some of the maybe not so sexy stuff and talk a little bit about the market itself. Always look at some of the market data information. When I know this is actually the best slide in the whole slideshow. No, I'm just kidding. So let me tell you a little bit about your market. Currently, when you look at how much the consumers in this county spend on retail products and services, they're spending $458 million in 68 in retail goods and services. But your stores are not selling anywhere near that. In fact, $277 million are leaving Gladwin County every single year. Now, a lot of people love to jump in and they like to say they blame everything on Amazon. But of all of that number, less than 10% of your overall retail sales are going to any kind of online sales at all. And it's only projected to grow slightly over the next 5 years. So these numbers, some people might look at these and say that's really discouraging. But to me, what that $277 million symbolizes for us, that is truly money that already exists. You don't have to create it. You don't have to invent it. You just figure out how to capture it. It's money that exists here that you can keep here. So that kind of takes us to this absolutely fantastic slide. I put this in here only to give you a little bit of understanding of some of the data that I'm going to share with the county partners. This is what they call a retail leakage analysis. So what you see as you run down it is you literally see different business categories based off of the NAICS code that they use to file their taxes. So this might be food and beverage stores and then grocery stores, and it has all these different subcategories. This right here, this is what the residents in Gladwin County spend in those categories. This right here is what the stores in Gladwin County sell. And this is a number of showing how much is either leaving or coming into the county. So very, very good information. Something else that's kind of exciting is over the next 5 years, the retail market is projected to grow from 468 million to 514 million. So as we can imagine, when we sit there and we look at dynamics of retail trade, we have an opportunity not only to capture the dollars that exist today, but prepare ourselves to capture the growing dollars that the county is earning. Does that make sense? That's really important for us to understand because, one of the biggest topics that was kind of up here but didn't really play out in the focus groups itself was this rivalry between the two communities. Now, I understand that you're high school rivals. I understand that one of you is blue and one of you is red. But at the end of the day, you are very much in the same economic boat. And as your consumers are finding that they can't have their retail services served or retail needs served immediately in their community, they are truly jumping ship out of the county as a whole. So we want to work collectively to capture and grow that economy together. Does that make sense? Okay. The other thing that I always like to look at is I like to look a little bit at some of our job numbers. This comes from the U.S. Census website. What that top left kind of shows you is every day 1,780 people drive into Gladwin County to go to work. A little over 2,000 people live here and work here, but every single day, almost 6,000 people leave the county to go to work. Well, when you're spending all work day somewhere else, and a lot of your local retailers close at 5 or 6 p.m., it becomes difficult for those 6,000 people to become customers. So we have to think about those dynamics. This chart, I know this looks a little weird, but what this actually shows you is it shows you the directions that employees are leaving to go to work. So your largest is going southeast. Wonder where they're going, But it is kind of interesting. Your next two largest are almost equidistant going due north and due south. I was a little shocked that southwest wasn't a little bit stronger. But again, all of that information simply goes into the wisdom and market understanding before we can dig into any recommendations for the community. So then from there, I want to introduce the elements of this toolbox. I think a lot of times people in my industry, they get confused of using buzzwords just to make things confusing. And a brand can oftentimes be confusing. A lot of people confuse a brand and a logo. What we're really looking at is we're trying to create a consistent communication platform that captures your personality and uses it to help you grow in the way that is true to who you are. So when we do that, this branding toolbox really is built up of 4 simple components. We want to look at typefaces. We want to look at color palettes. We want to look at our approach to graphics. And then we want to look at our use of message. So I'm going to start out with the typefaces. So we're getting creative. Everybody ready for this? Getting creative. Typefaces can be kind of funny. I think a lot of times as people have put more and more on their computers, they see that as a challenge to see how many they can use at one time. And that doesn't always make for the most appealing aesthetic. So one of the things that I wanted to do as I started to look at this, I was like, look, I've got multiple cities, I've got county level, I've got a lot of different organizations. How can I make this easy? And what I decided to do was I decided to land on a single type family. And the type family is called Hanley. And the thing that I really loved about this type family is it contains all of these different variations in one typeface. So literally, what better way to work together than have something that's kind of a Swiss Army knife of communication? So the thing that really drew me to it was that very top, the serif typeface. It's all caps. It's very traditional. One of the things that we heard in every community was this kind of traditional basis that connects everybody here. We are a real community. We are connected to one another. But it allows us to have a cleaner sans serif version, which is a little bit more contemporary, a little bit more content neutral, and even have script typefaces and different variations like that. So literally you've got a bunch of different options all built into one tool. So then from there, we jump at colors. What do we do? What do we do? So colors are an interesting dynamic because I think that any brand system in Gladwin County that did not pay tribute to the individual colors of each community that carry so much pride would be a failed system. But the thing that I also know is red and blue are both primary colors. So if you know anything about color theory, that literally means they are as far away from one another as two colors can be. So we need to expand the palette. So what I did was I turned these two foundation colors into a 7-color palette. So I expanded those out. Now, when you have red, red's an interesting color because light red is not light red. What is light red? It's pink, right? So we found that a lot of communities aren't overly excited about using pink. We decided to move a little bit more in the warm tone. So we have this red, then we have this orange. Then we've got a nice kind of nature-based brown. We've got 2 tones of green, and then we've got 2 tones of blue. So it all kind of connects to one another. But then what you start to see from the system is you can preserve this blue of Gladwin, this red of Beaverton, and really bring these natural tones of browns and greens out on the county level as this connective tissue. So now all of a sudden, instead of using color as division, you're now using color as part of a connective system. And it's so funny. I mean, when I walked in this room before any of you were here, I walked in and I saw a sea of blue and red chairs. And I was like, this is going to be an interesting experiment. You know, like, I wonder if there's going to be any kind of color bias in what chairs people sit in. But, you know, I was telling somebody earlier, I'm the same way. My mom taught at our local high school. I was the third of 3 boys who were student body presidents. And our rival were the Eastside Eagles, and they were blue and yellow. And every time I see blue and yellow to this day, my stomach turns a little bit. Like, I understand the power of that rivalry, but I also understand that as it evolves, we truly are in a single shared economy. Now, as we continue to move forward, I want to talk a little bit about the graphics. A lot of times, people think about brands as a single overarching image that forces everyone to look exactly alike. And if you do that in Gladwin County, you fail. So we have to understand that a good brand system is actually a system that's based off of versatility. And we take inspiration from colleges and universities. I am really sorry for any of you that are Wolverine fans. Michigan, unfortunately, is one of the few major universities in the United States that breaks my illustration because they use the block M for everything. But in most institutions, one of the things that you will find is you will find that colors are connective tissue, but there is a different set of graphics for athletics than there is for academics. Just like in communities, we cannot have our city organizational logos be the only tool that tells what's going on in our community. We need to have that separation between community brands and destination brands and start to build all those different tools in our toolbox. So then from there, I want to share a little bit with some of the values. These are some of the things that I heard over and over again, repeated in both communities. We are a real community. We are supportive of one another. Life is simpler here, and we are glad for that. We have natural surroundings that we love. We are proud of our history. We are based in tradition. We love the good old days, yet we are inventive and we are looking to the future. And when we hear those qualities, one of the things that was so cool is when we were doing the public input meeting in Gladwin, that's supportive of one another, the folks in Gladwin actually talked about how good Beaverton was at coming together as a community and accomplishing their goals. When you have that kind of dynamic, you've got the ingredients to have a truly, truly dynamic place. So with all of that, we then move into this thing that we call a brand statement. This is our narrative to start to give back to you some of the things that we felt like we heard people say. So I'm going to read that to you now. We are Beaverton, and we are Gladwin. We are proud to be the hometowns of Gladwin County. We are the lakes and the woods. We are the trails and the paths. We are the welcome escape and the warm feeling of home. We are the stories of our past, and we are the vision of our future. We are pioneers of this amazing wilderness, and we are pioneers of innovation. We invite you to discover, it's not done. We invite you to discover this amazing place we call home, explore Michigan's backyard, and discover all the opportunity conveniently located in the amazing place that we call home, the near north, the hometowns of Gladwin County. So, what that dynamic does is that dynamic, it allows us to place those shared values, the things that we heard from both communities, and intertwine them into a system that allows us to talk about the connection between the two. This is a rare dynamic that we have, and we should see it as an opportunity, not a challenge. So with this, I want to jump right in, and I'm always fair, so I like alphabetical order. So we're going to talk a little bit about Beaverton first, okay? So with the city of Beaverton, we start out with this seal. I always like to deconstruct these and look at what's in there and why is it in there. So we have this amazing building, we have the dam, and we have the water tower. So this seal is heavy on infrastructure. Got a lot of stuff in it. Seals are important tools in conveying that formal relationship between citizens and their government. I was inspired as I read about Beaverton's history, about the connection to Canada and the folks that came here and set up the industry that really served as your foundation. And I wanted to be able to give something that I felt like paid tribute to that background, because I thought it was really, really cool. But, you know, before I could jump in, like I have to look at all these things that exist. So what are you doing right? You are trying to use red as a connective tool. And you are also every now and then consistently using a B, because you're Beaverton, right? But other than that, there's a lot of different stuff going on. That difference is okay, but you'd love to be able to stitch those threads a little tighter, weave that story a little bit closer together so people can easier connect the dots easier. So we've seen our colors, we've seen our typeface, and what I'm recommending with that city is that it evolves to look something like this. So it still incorporates that dam, but it also incorporates kind of the river and the lake. It has a formal feeling, very much like a seal would. But guess what? You're called Beaverton. You are the home of the beavers, and it is okay to have a beaver on your seal. You know? It gives you this kind of formal governmental look. With a system like this, it can expand out. It works in one color. It works in reverse. It gives you those variations and those different adaptations that a government needs to be able to be consistent. But again, this is just that governmental identity. This is kind of the formal. This is not what we're using to market ourselves. This is what we're using to communicate about the things that the city does and the services that they provide. But when we start to talk about the destination, that gets a little bit harder. How do you combine being a place that is shaped by, being a warm and caring community with this thermoforming capital of the world? That's a phrase that we heard a lot. And I really kind of said to myself, I want to have a clever and subtle connection to thermoforming without saying the thermoforming capital of the world. There's something that's maybe a little bit sterile about that statement, but can we combine the two? And what I finally landed on, and if you were here last Tuesday night and you participated in the community input session, I was truly taken aback by how many people got choked up as they were talking about their community. They were truly emotional in telling stories about Beaverton. So how do we take that heart? How do we take kind of an iconic homage to a bee and then tie it all together with thermoforming? And I created something that looks like this. We've got 4 interlocking hearts that also kind of create this capital B, and introducing this simple phrase, a lasting impression. That is the byproduct of the thermoforming process, and it is also the thing that your connection to one another creates. So you have this very simple phrase that allows you to tell both an economic development story and a quality of life story in a single simple phrase. And again, with this, you have those different variations. You have that ability to grow and expand the system. And then you start to have those tools that you need. You start to have that city identity and the community brand. But if you stop there, you wouldn't have enough tools. So you have to think about, how does this make its way into the community itself? And I want to start out with the schools. We had a great conversation the other day about Beaverton rural schools. And does that name help us or hurt us? Thought it was a really insightful conversation. The simple word rural, in my opinion, denotes a lower expected quality. I didn't hear any anecdotes about anything but having the utmost of quality, but you do have that name to contend with. So what I'm showing here is I'm showing some very simple evolutions. Now, for those of you that absolutely love the Oregon State Beaver logo, I get it. I'm just throwing some more stuff out there. But let's start at the top. We have the crest. Purely formed in academia. It's been around. You've been using it, and it makes perfect sense for that academic side. But maybe it is time to consider that move to simply being known as Beaverton Schools. It doesn't change your status as being a rural school district, but it does allow you to better control your narrative. And then showing how that makes its way over on an academic side to your individual building identities. And then really reserving that beaver for more of your athletic talk. So again, what you see is you see some type consistency once you get down into the athletic graphics. And one of the things that a lot of institutions have started to do is they have that long-standing logo that they've been using for years, but then they adopt various versions. So if you're a hockey player, you've got your primary and then you got your shoulder patch. You've got that secondary logo. So being able to have some different variations that work for the school itself. Now, next, I want to talk a little bit about the Beaverton Area Business Association. This is an association that in their current logo, they very, very clearly define their 4 tenets. They're focused on church, on manufacturing, on business, and on education. The logo currently is in a diamond shape, and as many logos in Michigan do, it features the mitten with a star, you know? But I am here to tell you today that logos don't have to be maps anymore. People carry Google Maps with them in their phone, so your logo doesn't actually have to convey where you are in the state. So feel free to have something that maybe is a little bit more vibrant, a little bit more clean. If this is the organization that's breathing life and vibrancy into the community, allow it to have some color, allow it to have some freshness. So what I'm showing here is a very simple kind of evolution using those core content colors, being able to give a clean, simplified BABA version, which I know people refer to it as BABA a lot, but then being able to show how those 4 colors truly symbolize those 4 tenets of that organization. So that might be a way that it can evolve. Now, this is a dramatic redesign from what currently exists, but everything doesn't have to be a dramatic change. We're in this amazing, Beaverton Activity Center, and as you can see on the front of the podium, the pre-existing logo. Well, you don't have to completely destroy everything that you've invested in. So what I'm showing here is a very simple evolution. You've got this word type that can simply adopt the typefaces and be rolled out organically without the desire to change anything that you've already spent on. But I can't tell you how many times I heard people say the BAC. So if that's what people are saying, we need to also make sure that we have a logo that captures the vernacular. Making the typeface roll over into Think Big, both a program and a room, it's fantastic. And then I just kind of introduced a little tagline of Beaverton Activity Center, where the community comes together. Because that's what it's for, and that's what happens here. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're going to take a pause, and we're going to switch over to Gladwin. So it goes blue, right? I'm figuring this out. I'm figuring it out. So what did I say about maps, Mayor? Yeah, so same deal. Essentially, the BABA and City of Gladwin had the exact same logo. Star was slightly different. So, with this, I can pretty much guess when this was designed based off the look of things. So we're going to update this, and we're going to go in a slightly different direction for the seal. But we also have to think about all those different components that exist. Gladwin wins an award. I do this a lot. Gladwin has some absolutely beautiful signs, and none of them look alike in any way, shape, or form. Beautiful wood carved signs that are the perfect encapsulation of somebody saying, we really need a sign for the park. Yeah, you're right. We do need a sign for a park. Let's design that. And it's like you don't have any other signs that exist. But one of the other things that I heard as we were talking is we heard a lot of people reference those Gladwin gateway signs with that deer. So we wanted to take some of those things that we heard. And again, you guys, I think it's easy when you're a rural county to kind of feel like everything has to be super kind of conservative in the way that it's designed. Like that old seal is very, very industrial. But the settlement heritage of this community is pretty amazing. And being able to tie into something there, I wanted to go through, I wanted to tie into your connection with the trees. I wanted to have a formal crest that really felt very crest-like. I actually went through and found the Gladwin family crest, which got this like it's got a red sash on it, which is funny. But it has a sword that runs down it, and I find that typically, weaponry might not go over well. So what I'm showing is something that looks like this. Again, very clean, very formal. It can represent that city. So when you start to look at the city logo again, it cleans up into a one-color version. You have the more formalized circular seal version of it, but then you also have the crest as tied with the word type. So you've got that formal government, but exact same challenge that we have once we go to Gladwin. How do you combine these close personal connections in a place that feels like home with river walks and lakes and trails and amazing outdoors? I think one of the things that really stuck out to me, and I feel like I heard the citizens say it loud and clear, there is excitement around the idea of Gladwin positioning itself as a regional outdoor recreation base camp and being able to kind of be the place where outdoor access can be found, but also where outdoor access makes its way down into downtown. So it is where you walk the downtown streets and then get onto the river walk and walk the river. So with all of that, I wanted to do something that was a little cleaner, a little more contemporary, kind of like the Beaverton destination was. And I kept hearing the stories about people with lake cottages and the vacations and the getaways, and isn't it amazing that we live in a place that other people vacation? And so I'm recommending something that just looks like this, and this very simple line, connected by nature. So it makes a point talking about the interconnection between people, talks about all of the regional assets that we have to experience, talks about that it is our nature to connect with one another, but then it also makes that simple connection to the outdoor recreation. So you have a very formal, and then you have a more contemporary. And again, you've got a system that can grow and expand from there. Got this destination brand and organization brand that come together. And then again, Gladwin brand extension. So the Gladwin Community Schools, slightly different. You've got the Flying G, and I'm sure that Flying G has been around for a while. Since when?
Since when?
38. So again, this is not intended to replace any of the things that have existed, but you've got that kind of that interesting combination of, is it a goshawk? Is that what it's called?
It's Flying G.
Flying G. Gotcha. I hear you. So being able to go through and see some ways that can kind of grow and expand. Again, you see the introduction of more of an education-oriented crest for the school district itself, and then exploring some different adaptations that you can have with your athletic packaging. You could have, if some of you are offended by the addition of a goshawk head, and just like the Flying G, then hey, retro style, right? We go back to no head, the headless G. But you can just always play around with these different dynamics, being able to have this this ability to really kind of connect. I live in Milford, Delaware, and our high school mascot is the Buccaneer. And for years, they have been using this very, very childishly drawn pirate as their logo. And people had become emotionally connected to the childishly drawn pirate, as you can imagine. So you couldn't just replace it. But we were able to introduce some new tools in that system. And it's been amazing to see how by introducing new options, you drive the desire for people to have that connection. You increase merchandise sales and you increase visual presence in community, which then increases the perception of pride. And it's one of those things where major sports understand this completely because they love their merchandise revenues. Local school districts don't think a whole lot about, hey, we need to change this up so we can make more money on merchandise, but I think we can all understand the value behind increased school pride. So then from there, we also have the Gladwin Business and Professionals Association. Their current logo features the lamppost, which is a pretty typical solution for that. But I also think that organizations like that, they're a little savvier than just a lamppost these days. They're kind of a cool grassroots economic development entity. And the purpose of that organization is really to help turn this place into a destination. So what I'm showing here is a much cleaner evolution of that, turning this G into a kind of destination pinpoint. And one thing that I want you to notice, the local high school is the Flying G's. I'm comfortable using monogram G's for the city of Gladwin. But once we hit the county level, we will depart from that, because that is a place where the connection between the two starts to break. So using it in kind of this local integration makes a lot of sense, okay? So then, just to recap, we go from things like this to this. Hopefully you see that as being a slight improvement. And then we start to look at the county. Now, the county is a funny entity. Not just this county, every county. People rarely associate with counties the way that they associate with cities. A city is where you're from. The county sometimes is kind of the land in between. It's a different relationship. When you're marketing on a county level, one of the biggest complaints is county marketing typically only adopts what we call the umbrella approach. The umbrella approach is fine when it serves as a tool to help gather people together and protect them and rally them together. But the problem in the county level is typically the umbrella becomes all-encompassing and all-covering, and anything under it becomes invisible. And that is where participation and cooperation is lost. When you have to give away your local community's identity to participate in a county marketing system, then you have actually created the ingredients for failure. So a good county system understands when it needs to serve as an umbrella, gathering parts together, and when it needs to serve as a platter, offering up the entrees. Those entrees are your cities, your schools, your events. Does that make sense? Having the ability to be both kind of top tier and subservient. That is when you create a system that truly works. So when we look at the county level, man, another seal. This one is a good one, right? We should leave this just like it is. This is the one that has a farm, a tree, a double-handle saw, an Amish wagon, handshaking, both genders graduating because we're fair, an oil rig, and a deer showing you its hind end. So it's definitely thorough, right? It's definitely thorough. So you see the county seal, and then you see some of the things that exist under this. The chamber, this is a newer logo. You can tell that this has been designed. This is really, really good. The Gladwin County EDC, again, a relatively recent logo that you can see has been designed. I absolutely adore the Gladwin County Community Foundation logo. It is so clean and simple, but if you look at the gestures, it almost reinforces every single thing that I had recommended without me knowing what it looked like first. So you've got the red of Beaverton, you've got the blue of Gladwin, you've got green and brown, all being brought together with this pine cone icon. So, you know, it's just this really nice exercise in showing connectedness, so good job. And it starts to show you how those things can exist and how they can work. So with the county, this one's a little funny. County seals are hard. I wanted to keep those main elements because I didn't want it to feel like we were turning our back on everything. So I kept the Amish carriage, I kept the handshake, and I kept the deer, and I kept the mortarboard. The deer is no longer showing you its hind. It's just like the deer head. But what you can start to see is it's a cleaner kind of easier to digest. I'm still a little on the fence about the colors, but the nice thing is it works really well in one color, and it just kind of bumps up that whole identity a little bit on the county side. But again, that's just the county government. So what do we do to tell the story of these two different communities? And we had so many amazing ideas. I'd love to sit here and take credit for everything that you're seeing, but this is not me. This is you all. There were things that came out of these meetings that you all suggested, and they were really good ideas. Bob came up with Michigan's backyard. And that concept is so unbelievably simple and relatable, but no one's using it. It's kind of shocking that an idea that simple is not in play. So the other thing that came out was this idea of near north. The value that is thought of when you think of north, but the convenience of being so very close. This idea that you didn't know that escape could be so convenient. That to me is a message that goes really, really far. But then the other thing that I think is very, very important is if we're going to effectively communicate on a county level, we have to understand that the thing that we bring to the market can't be Gladwin County first. It just can't. It's not going to work. When you have a dynamic of a city and a county that share the name, it creates things that make it hard. So how do we make it easy? So what I'm suggesting is something that looks like this. Explore Michigan's backyard, the near north hometowns of Gladwin County. So this idea of hometowns, that can be White Star. You know, that can be the communities around lakes. That can be the connection that people have with places. But now all of a sudden, you're literally putting that governmental basket of the county at a tertiary level of messaging importance. And you're bringing to the forefront this idea of near north. And you might say that looks a little funny with this placement, but this primary placement is done on purpose so that the N is directly over the compass pointing north. You know, so you've got some meaning that's kind of built into it. So just like we've seen on the two city levels, you've got this destination brand and the county brand. But again, we have to look at brand extension on this as well. So we look at some of the things that Bob was doing with the EDC and how can we adopt the typefaces and take some of those concepts and keep going and keeping things fresh. So this might be kind of a long-term evolution on the EDC standpoint. Yvette with the chamber has done really good things with her logo. She said to me, hey, there are a couple things about this that make it hard to use. Has a lot of gradients in it. So keeping the logo the same, adopting the typeface, slightly changing the colors, and now all of a sudden, it doesn't look like she's changed, and she's reinforcing the countywide brand system. I heard so much talk this week about the trails. And I kept asking, what is the name? And they said, the trails. So what I want to do is I want to introduce a very, very simple idea. Yvette had said it a couple times. You use this idea of Trail of Two Cities, the trail network, and kind of have that as your overarching. And then you just use this simple icon where you can have greenways, blueways, river walks, whatever you want. The simple graphic tool now becomes your graphic connector to any trail network or access point. Does that make sense? So like now what you're doing is you're taking that countywide brand and you're connecting it into outdoor access from the trail network standpoint. We had a ton of folks from the Gladwin Area Artists Guild, fantastic organization. How do we take that and connect it? You know, again, once you see this palette, the opportunities are endless for these organizations. They can tap into the colors, they can tap into the typefaces, and they can create icons that they feel like capture what it is that they do. We've been in connection with the Gladwin County District Library through this whole process with it hosting us in both facilities. So what would a logo for that look like? Again, being able to take that opportunity, tie that in, use those colors to create the connective tissue. Gladwin Area Friends of the Theater. It starts to become easy. when you realize that every single time you try to create a new graphic tool, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You now have a toolbox to pull from. I do this a lot. I've worked in communities all over this country. I heard about something that I had never heard of before, the Gladwin County Small Shop Trail. I think that this is really, really cool. Being able to take this, tie it in, and be able to own that as a way to drive people throughout the community, that's a great idea. But then we also heard a lot about shop local. Well, I already talked to you about retail leakage. $277 million leaving. If the only message that you bring to market is shop local all by itself, what that really says is shop local or my kids won't have dinner. It's not actually a compelling value statement to the consumer. It's more of a plea. How do we take that and own that? And how do we create a message that is truly county-wide? And then I came up with this. Shop local, be glad. You'll feel the difference. You know, it might seem silly, but it is a simple, relatable message that truly integrates the identity of each community. Those are the kind of ways that we show people how you work together and how everything doesn't have to be rocket science. Being able to have these different elements, being able to kind of tell these stories, being able to see merchandise start to make its way out, and you know, being able to, I would totally buy that red hat with a white beaver on it today. If that was available, I would wear that, and of course I'd have to take it off halfway through to wear Gladwin stuff or just drink out of a Gladwin water bottle while wearing a Beaverton hat. But again, the merchandising, I think a lot of times people feel like, oh God, we've got to control every aspect of this brand. We have to make sure that people don't break it. They're not going to break it. I promise. I've done this almost 600 times. They're not going to break it. If they do, it'll be an accident. They're not as malicious as people think they are. Let's remove barriers. Let's allow our businesses to profit off of this investment, and let's be able to build community pride together. The next thing is wayfinding signage. Now, people always like to talk about countywide wayfinding signage like that is some sort of mythical unicorn that, you know, poops glitter and, you know, shares ice cream with everybody. Countywide wayfinding signage is definitely, it is a tactic that you need to explore and you need to think about. You need to think about gateway entrances that announce arrival into the county. You need to think about, these signs are called trailblazers. Trailblazers have 3 destinations on them. They create that continuous conversation after you announce arrival. But the problem is, if this is the only thing that you have in your signage system, there's absolutely zero motivation for your localities to integrate the wayfinding system into their city limits. So you have to have those adaptations where the system then changes and adopts the local community identities so that when you hit those gateway announcements and when you drive through those corridors, the fact that you're in somewhere different is now announced to you. And then the final thing that I want to share with you is just some simple ideas from kind of a marketing standpoint, just this messaging and being able to take that kind of that near idea, near to everything, far from routine, near to my heart, far from ordinary. And my absolute favorite thing that I learned this week in a county of 4 stoplights, with 4 stoplights, I spelled it wrong, but with only 4 traffic lights in the county, relaxation is never stuck in traffic. So you can start to see there's some really interesting and dynamic ways that you can tell the story. Now, I want to talk briefly about next steps so you can kind of know how this goes from here. And then I'd love to give a quick opportunity for folks to just kind of share their initial reactions. But our goal is to be able to deliver tools into the hands of the communities very quickly. So each community has assembled a steering committee. And then on the county level, there's a firm that's literally ready to take the product and begin running on product development. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating 3 separate brand support packages that we can share on all 3 levels. And literally everything that exists in there becomes yours to use. This is not one of those weird things where there's you know, there are restrictions or copyrights, we transfer everything over to the communities. Everything is delivered by digital link. All logos you saw, they will be saved out in 5 different file formats, so you always have exactly what you need. If you're going to paint a water tower, you don't have to give somebody a JPEG and have it turn into these little weird grids of squares. So you'll literally have all of the tools that you need. We've purchased the typefaces so that we can share those with you all as users. We'll define all the colors so that you can actually have color consistency. It is not good enough for Beaverton to just be red and for Gladwin to just be blue. You actually need to use the same red and blue. That consistency shows a certain level of professionalism. Now, you don't have to go all Coca-Cola on it, where everything has to be so precise, but at least having some general understanding of what color red you have. And if that sounds weird, my wife and I got into a 4-hour argument on shades of white. So if there are shades of white, I guarantee you that the differences in red matter. So it really is, it's focused on being a toolkit that you have open access to, that you can take and run with. For these organizations, I didn't ask anybody's permission. I just kind of did this as an attempt to show you the power of working together. You don't have to use any of these, and you're free to edit and change these all you want, but they are yours to have. So with that, I want to extend my thank you to all of you for your participation during this process. Thank you for your attention during this, and I'd love to open it up for comments. I mean, initial reactions. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Mitch Kahn, I'm a member of the Gladwin Chamber of Commerce.
Yep.
And the GVPA and the Sugar Springs Planning Committee. I'm also president of a global digital marketing firm. I really am impressed by what you put together here.
Thank you.
I do have a couple of questions.
Okay.
And you left one hanging. In the beginning, you show that we have leakage of 60% of the retail purchases are out of the county.
Mm-hmm.
And you're looking at a 2% growth over the next, per annum over the next 5 years.
Right.
But you didn't tie that back. Okay, once we've adopted all of the logos, you didn't tie that back. And my second question, so my question is, what's your strategy to make that step once we've rebranded? And the second question is, the total absence of Sugar Springs, which has almost as many households as Beaverton and Gladwin put together, was totally ignored in this presentation. So I was wondering if there was any thought to it, and you just tossed it out, or you just hadn't gotten there.
No, there wasn't thought to it at all. This process was a unique one. They have taken a traditional scope of branding for one community, and I'm now expected to do 2 communities and a county. We didn't have the capacity to do input on the Sugar Springs. Sugar Springs came up over and over again. My hope was that because of the way that I approach the branding system through the elements that are defined, that essentially what it allows you all as a place to do is to simply go through a relatively succinct creative process of identifying your icon. You know what I mean? Like, we've kind of paved the path leading up to it. But the other thing that we heard loud and clear is there was the potential for other little, I don't know the best way to describe, lake communities or, enclaves of people. We wanted this to very much be seen as an open-ended and expandable system. Now, that being said, I would be happy to offer to Sugar Springs if there was obviously I'm working on a time frame, but if there were suggestions that came out on things that I might be able to do to be able to give a recommendation to Sugar Springs, I'd be glad to do that. And then as to the first question you asked, I kind of want to answer it seriously, and I kind of want to punt and say that on the county marketing level, that's kind of where the tactical rubber hits the road. So there's a bit of a handoff that happens to countywide marketing. So from a strategy standpoint, especially an individual market-focused strategy, an individual messaging strategy, we're kind of prepared to hand off a baton on that, and their resources and talent ready to take that baton. So it's not like a complete drop in the track and walk away. But I think one of the biggest things that I really do believe is I believe that these organizations that exist in these communities, they exist for a particular purpose, and they exist with a pretty clear understanding of a reasonable target market for the communication that they are putting together. So the absolute first wave is simply consolidating the messaging together, being able to use the tools so that the communities are starting to get the credit for all the things that are going on here. From a geographic standpoint, after looking at the county, you do not have very many mechanisms in play that are intended to mount gigantic remote marketing campaigns. You're not going to be able to sit there and say, you know what, we've done a detailed analysis and we've decided that our future lies in Central Ohio. But we all know that from a retail capture standpoint, we're losing the overwhelming majority of our retail customers to West Branch and Midland. So from a retail strategy standpoint, we want to reintroduce our customers to what we offer in Gladwin County, and we have to disrupt what they think they know. Local shoppers who create their own retail habits, they don't realize that things have changed underneath them. The moment that they lose the motivation to explore, because they're not motivated to discover their own community, they think they already know it. So one of the first things that we want to do from a tactical standpoint is have the local business associations start to think about how can we invite our own citizens back in and discover what we have right underneath their toes. We've talked a little bit about some of those strategies. One of the ideas that we threw out was maybe doing a seasonal product catalog where we highlight products that people didn't realize they could get right here in the county. And then that way we start to curb that automatic instinctual idea, oh, if I need that, I have to leave to get it. So I know it was kind of a political answer, but I mean, we did actually think about it. Thank you for starting off with a hard one, a hard, detailed, multi-part question and answer. Anybody else on initial thoughts? Yes, sir.
So Ben, you know, from my perspective, sitting in the meeting last week, I would have been happy if you would have gotten through slide 10. From a consistency perspective, you know, kind of leveling everything off to make it identifiable to each one of the communities, but then under that umbrella platter metaphor that you utilized, I think that was just amazing. So kudos to you to get to slide 75.
Thank you.
You know, I've lived here 40 years almost, and I've never seen anything to this level be done, and I applaud you for that. I applaud everybody in this room for having the discussion. As a Beaverton resident, it allows me to identify with my community, but it also allows me to identify with my neighbor to the north. And, you know, in that whole all-encompassing, you know, we're stronger if we're together kind of a mentality. Mm-hmm. So I think it's an awesome springboard for everybody to be able to utilize moving forward, whether you're a school district or a property owners association or anything like that. And the fact that it doesn't so narrowly focus on any one thing, mm-hmm. I think is the beauty of the whole thing.
Awesome.
When you focus so much on fill in the blank,
right?
You alienate a lot of people. You may energize a small minority mm-hmm. relative to the whole demographic, but if you have the ability to tie it all together with, I mean, the color schemes moving from left to right to center, just you know, I think it's amazing. So. Definitely appreciate the time that you've taken over the last 7 days yep. to do this. I'm pretty confident in saying none of us do this as professionally as much as you do, at least I don't. So to see this, to think about something as simple as making the typeface consistent, I would have never thought of that, but you can see how it lends itself to anything that you want to do. So yeah, thank you for your time. This is a lot more than I would have expected to see today. So
thank you so much.
As a lifetime resident, thank you for that.
Thank you. That means a lot.
I applaud you for everything that you've done. I love the color combinations and everything. I will say for the county though, I think that we need something about the water systems. As far as the river systems, because every single township that's where all of the base of the community is, in every single township, with the exception of Bentley. They don't have any rivers, but you know, the river system is where the population is, and that's what people come up here for most often. Absolutely.
And I will say the only justification that I will say, because I think that point is completely valid, I don't argue it at all, but because I know I'm right. The one thing though that I do that is my impression, and this maybe this comes from somebody outside of Michigan, maybe this is truly an outsider perception, but when I think of Michigan's North, I think that water is integral to everything that brand means. So to me, when I was thinking of integrating near north, that brought in outdoors, trees, water. So we can do a better job, and you're right, but I do want you to know that was not lost. It was integrated in that brand that I felt like I was connecting to. But that is a really, really good point. It's just a couple minutes after 7. Let's do maybe 1 or 2 more questions or comments. Yes, sir.
So, I like your presentation. Not living here all my life, I understand a lot of things that you brought in. My question is, okay, so you have a brand, you have all this identity. How do you translate that into dollars and cents and actually make the place less likely to leak?
So, again, I think with a dynamic like that, when a community understands and begins to adopt a brand system, it begins to change the way that they think about communicating. Everything that communities do pre-brand system is all done a la carte. It's always done as the desire or the purpose is identified. Signage is a great example. You go through a community and there's rarely a uniform and collective process to think about how can we effectively communicate traversing people through our communities from entry to destination in a seamless experience. But instead, what do? We find out that somebody is peeing in the creek at the city park, so we put a giant sign in bold red letters, "Do not pee in the creek," because this is a city park. And so everything is kind of a signage by demand. It's the same thing with our marketing. As you saw, we went through this. Literally, we knew that we had this connective tissue of blue, but there's literally absolutely no messaging coordination between any of the entities. One of the best cooperations that we saw was some of the messaging that came out of countywide EDC and chamber, understanding that we're talking about multiple angles of the business community, so it makes sense for us to partner, and it also makes sense for us to kind of speak together. So I wish that I could say, when you adopt this brand system, then your sales tax revenues are going to go up by 8.5%. But the thing that we have seen time and time again is when a community begins to adopt a system that allows them to show that they're working together, they become more attractive to investors. They become a kind of place that business prospects feel better about taking a risk on. Community pride goes up, and eventually we see sales tax go up and start to break trends. So it really, there's just a lot to be said about the power of working together. I go back to your comment about neighbors. You know, it's like, it is absolutely okay for Beaverton to be mad about what Gladwin is building in their backyard with those weird cinder blocks and floodlights that are on all day long, right? But when there's an assault on your street, you need to be able to come together as neighbors and say, we don't want that to happen on our street. It's just kind of like I'm business partners with my oldest brother. He is a pain in the butt. But when you attack the Muldrow name, we are together. And the problem in Gladwin County has been, it's almost like you lacked a last name, because the last name was also the first name of one of the parties. So when you try to say we need to work together as a county, you're not saying we need to work together as a county. We're saying, Beaverton, you need to no longer be Beaverton anymore. You need to be Gladwin. And Beaverton ain't gonna do that. I wouldn't do that, you know? So I think one of the biggest byproducts is having a platform that allows the individual partners to come to the stage without feeling like they're gonna be overshadowed. You're gonna see more efficiency in all of the organizations who are already doing things to improve the economy. So every single organization, the school district isn't just here to educate. When you've got a good education, people wanna live there. So it all starts, it's like a snowball. It really starts to work together through that cooperation. Last one in the very back, I think.
So
We'll get
since
you.
I've been here, I posted on Facebook that I'm at the rebranding meeting. I already have people asking what that's all about. When will we be able, when will what was here be available to the public for other people to jump on board and to understand what's going on?
It's a great question. That's almost like I lobbed you a softball. I recorded this presentation and I will be posting it on YouTube, and it will be available tomorrow. So people who couldn't join us tonight, they're going to be able to see everything that I recommended. They're going to be able to hear why we recommended what we did. That'll be available tomorrow. So step one, people who are interested, share that link with them. It's going to be posted on social media. We're going to post it on city websites, and Joe and Yvette and Bob and Heath and Chris and everybody will make sure that that information gets out. But then from there, my hope is that as in the next 2 to 4 weeks, I would love to be able to have the toolkits finalized based off refinements from the communities, and then be able to make those available. So we're going to have kind of some central repositories in some of our countywide organizations that will have access to all the tools, and then we'll have community-oriented ones that we share locally too. So first phase is folks that are interested, let's send them to the video. Let's make sure that they're educated about the recommendations, and then if you got to sit through an hour of hearing me talk, they got to sit through an hour of hearing me talk, and then from there, next 2 to 4 weeks, and we'll look for final delivery.
Right.
And then let's go ahead, and you had one, so let's.
Well, I want to ask about the tie-in of all this, which is great, to like retail and industry.
Mm-hmm.
So when we do retailers, our advertising. Can we steal that logo? Can we steal those colors? The type print's easy. I mean, once you give it to us. But what do you suggest for that so that we connect? So the retailers and businesses and industry. I mean, we see the school and the cities.
So when you start to go into private sector business, one of the things that a private sector business should always do is they should always want to protect and preserve their own brand ahead of the community in which they're oriented. So being able to make these tools available from your standpoint, I think one of the things that I would love for you to be able to think about is the idea of, in doing business to business with construction companies all over the state, how can we better tell the story of proudly being located in Gladwin County? You know, so that's the thing. It becomes a little bit more of a narrative integration from the B2B standpoint than it does, you need to change your logo so that you fit in with the county. Now, that being said, let's say that you're going to do some sort of an event where you invite customers into the county to do some sort of customer appreciation. You can integrate the typefaces or the colors or whatever you want in doing that event logo. It's completely up to you. One of the great things about having a brand system is you have all these varying levels of commitment. You could literally just incorporate the idea of near north. When you think we're too far to get your lumber, just remember we're the near north. You know, so figure out those easy ways to integrate whatever concept fits the best for you to profit off of it. And I think that's one of the biggest things is, I don't want any private sector business to think the integration of the brand is charity. I want it to benefit them. And collectively, when the private sector adopts this and begins to use it and sing in chorus about it, then it is creating value in it. So with that, Yvette, I think you wanted to say something, and then we'll wrap up.
I did. And all of this wraps, I have to thank Ben tremendously, because this was originally just going to be a Beaverton and just a city of Gladwin, city of Beaverton brand. But since it's just unique, because we're doing the county too, so he took that on. But we have our marketing people here, so we have Dustin Newmeyer and we have Stephen Cron here, and they're with the Barrel Creative, and they're going to be helping us roll out the county-wide marketing and working with us closely, and they've already talked with Ben, and they're going to be sharing this toolkit. So you're going to see a lot of this on a county level rolling out with our grant that we received and some of the things that we have. So this is just a tremendous, tremendous opportunity for our area and for our county and for our cities, and it's just about bringing things together. I know Bob and I talked about this for 3 years. We talked about doing this, of something of this magnitude, and so to have Ben be able to be that connector with the cities, and then to have a Barrel with our county to get this to come out, it's just an awesome opportunity. I want to thank you, Ben, and thank you, Dustin and Steve. I can't wait to see all the things that we create together.
Awesome. All right, guys, with that, we've been going for an hour and 15 minutes. I like to be prompt. Thank you again for your participation. Thank you for everything that you put into this. And also just thank you for being passionate about your community. It's so very, very important for you to be involved and for you to participate in things like this. And thanks, Joe, for helping to coordinate this. Project Rising Tide's a unique opportunity, and it's been great to work with Joe. So, Joe, I'll turn it over to you.